Her grandson locked her in the car, while he pitched her land to investors inside. Dorothy Ashburn, widowed and underestimated, sat still and listened. They called it family planning. She called it theft. By sunrise, the deed was sold, the trust revoked, and every access they had, gone. They thought she'd forget. She remembered everything, and made sure the courts did too. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The windows were already fogging by the time the lobby lights blinked on across the parking lot. Dot sat motionless in the back seat, coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, the engine still running. A soft purr in the cold Arizona night. Her seatbelt was unbuckled, but she hadn't moved since the doors shut behind her. Outside, the wind pressed dry leaves across the pavement like brittle paper scraps. The hotel sat just off the freeway, modest but clean, one of those chain inns that smelled faintly of detergent and resignation. Its windows glowed yellow behind blackout curtains. A neon vacancy sign flickered at half strength. Through the windshield she could see them. Trent, tall and impatient, his shoulders hunched from effort, as if booking a room were an Olympic event. Beside him, Madeline scrolled her phone, posture perfect, hair pulled into a too-tight bun that gave her face a permanent mask of practiced courtesy. Dot's fingers, wrapped in pale pink knit gloves, flexed once against her lap. She lifted one hand, tapped the window beside her twice. A gentle rhythm, not enough to make a scene. Just enough to see if they'd look back. They didn't. She watched Trent gesture at the receptionist, then check his watch, then shake his head. Madeline barely moved except to flash a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They looked like a couple running late for a flight, not the grandson and granddaughter-in-law of the woman they'd left locked in the car. Inside the vehicle, the air was growing stale despite the heater. Her breath left slow clouds on the glass. She reached for the control panel and turned the fan down, not off, just quieter. A sharp movement near the hotel door caught her attention. A man in a navy windbreaker, maybe in his 50s with thinning gray hair and kind eyes, stepped out, holding a clipboard. He paused mid-step, glancing toward the car, squinting at the idling engine. Dot didn't look away. He tilted his head, curious. His gaze lingered a few seconds longer than casual observation. Then he disappeared back inside. Dot leaned her head back against the seat and let out a slow breath. The car smelled faintly of energy drink, cheap cologne, and takeout wrappers, remnants of Trent's road trip provisions. She hadn't eaten since a late lunch in Flagstaff, though she hadn't said anything when they skipped dinner. She hadn't said anything at all. Not until now. So much for family vacation, she murmured to no one. She turned and reached for her handbag, black leather, scuffed at the edges but still elegant. It sat on the floor beside her, nestled between a half-empty water bottle and a wrinkled tote bag of crossword puzzles. Her gloved hands worked the clasp, slow and steady. She didn't pull out a phone or her reading glasses. She didn't need either. She pulled out the file, thick manila, labeled in her own handwriting just beneath the flap. Sedona Land Deed. She held it gently, like a secret that had waited too long to speak. Inside, folded in thirds, was a copy of the original document, notarized, stamped, and older than Trent's high school diploma. Her name, and her name alone, appeared on the ownership line, inheritance from her father, never transferred, never promised, just quietly misunderstood, and she had let them misunderstand. Let them speak in front of her, over her, about when we break ground and our land down there. Let them joke about development timelines and rustic Airbnbs and finally doing something useful with Grandma's dirt. She'd said nothing. She'd waited. Because silence, she had learned, unsettled people far more than argument ever could. The car interior had cooled enough for Dot to see her breath again. The heat was still on, but the vents had dulled to a whisper. Silence spread through the cabin like dusk itself. Slow, creeping, absolute. Dot reached back into her handbag and unfolded the manila file in her lap. The edges were soft from age, the paper inside crisp despite the years. She slipped the deed out gently, its folds well worn but clean, and read it again beneath the soft orange glow of the overhead cabin light. The name at the top, bold, centered, and undisturbed by any co-signers, was hers. Dorothy E. Ashburn, sole title holder, inherited owner, full rights. The Sedona parcel, all 17 acres of sun-drenched sandstone-split Arizona earth, belonged to no one else. Not to Trent, not to Madeline, not to the faceless development team he name-dropped. Ped over dinner. She flipped to the second page, the one no one ever bothered to read. Beneath a clause titled Restriction of Transfer, a single line stood out. Transfer by request only, not by suggestion, and never by assumption. It had been her father's language, archaic, almost poetic, but legally airtight. Dot traced the phrase with her fingertip. She remembered sitting across the dining table from Trent just months after her husband's funeral, her soup untouched while he held out papers she hadn't requested. "You don't have to worry about anything anymore, Grandma," he'd said with a smile just wide enough to mask his urgency. "We can just move it now before taxes get messy." Madeline had said nothing. She'd just passed Dot a pen, her nail polish the exact color of rose gold greed. Dot had taken the documents, smiled sweetly, and locked them in her filing cabinet. She let them think what they needed to think, that she was soft, fading, a loose thread to tie off. They never asked for confirmation. They just started talking as if the land already belonged to them, that quiet assumption that the elderly yield their stories and assets like autumn leaves. Dot clicked off the overhead light and reached for her second phone, the one they didn't know about. A tiny black flip phone with a prepaid number, purchased in cash at a pharmacy 2 towns back. Her thumb hovered over the first contact, Elaine, Home Office. She pressed call, 1 ring, 2. Then a voice answered, dry, unamused but sharp as ever. "This better be worth my chai steeping on the stove." "It's time," Dot said. "Initiate the freeze." Elaine didn't ask what she meant. She never had to. "I'll file the county lock tonight. The parcel will be flagged for sale block until you say otherwise." "And the new POA?" Dot asked. "Already drawn. Yours to assign. The old one's about to expire, tragically and permanently." Dot allowed herself a smile. "Good." Elaine exhaled like she'd been waiting years to hear those words. "Do you want to tell him before or after he sees the sold sign?" "After," Dot said softly. "Much after." She hung up. Outside, the night deepened into something closer to blue. A few moths circled the parking lot light. The sound of a lobby door opening made her glance up. Miles, the clerk from earlier, stepped out and started walking toward the car again. He had a paper cup in one hand, steam curling up into the cold. He tapped on the window, gentler this time. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice muffled but kind. "Are you all right?" Dot rolled the window down an inch, just enough for her voice to slip through. "Yes," she said calmly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." But her fingers rested firmly on the deed in her lap. The lobby smelled like brewed coffee and overused lemon cleaner. Dot stood just inside the automatic doors, coat buttoned, gloves in one hand, the other holding her purse close to her ribs. She stayed out of view for now, by the vending machines just beyond the potted ficus with plastic roots, watching. At the front desk, Trent's voice was already rising. "She wandered off," he said, too loud for a quiet morning. "We searched for 20 minutes before realizing she must have gone for one of her walks again." Miles, the night clerk, looked unconvinced. He tapped the keyboard slowly, deliberate. "Funny. I saw her in the car all night. Engine running. Parked right there. Slot 17. Madeline stepped in, her tone syrupy and amused. "She's eccentric. Sometimes she insists on staying in the car, even when it's cold. You know how older folks are. Stubborn. It's safer than letting her shuffle around unfamiliar hallways in the dark." Dot's fingers curled around the strap of her purse. Stubborn. That's what they'd called her the last time she declined their estate simplification meeting. Back then, Madeline had made tea and handed her a stack of pre-filled forms as if she were offering a crossword puzzle. "Grandma," Madeline had said sweetly. This isn't pressure. We just want you to feel secure about the future. Now here they were, feeding the same rehearsed calm to a stranger. Miles tilted his head slightly, eyes flicking between them. You locked the car, didn't you? Trent blinked. Excuse me? It was locked, Miles said again. I checked around 3 a.m. when I saw the headlights were still on. She didn't look like she was sleeping much. Madeline pressed her fingers to her temples. It's been a long drive. Yeah, Miles replied, monotone. Looks like it. Dot waited. She didn't need to step in. Not yet. She watched them take their keycards. Watched Trent scoop up the overnight receipt like it might bite him. Watched Madeline thank Miles with a forced smile so brittle it might have cracked if she used it again. Only after the glass doors slid closed behind them did Dot step forward. Miles glanced up and blinked. You're with them? She nodded. Technically. He watched her a moment, then chuckled under his breath. You sleep, all right? Dot's eyes were steady. Better than they will. Miles smiled. It wasn't patronizing. It was respectful. Curious, maybe, but cautious. You sure you're okay, ma'am? I'm fine, Dot replied, but I do have one favor. Sure, if anyone asks, she said softly. You never saw me here. He paused. Got it. Dot walked out, her shoes clicking softly on the tile. Outside, the car sat in the same spot. Engine off now, keys tucked safely in her coat pocket. She sat in the driver's seat and pulled out the flip phone again. 2 rings. Dot? The voice on the other end was rough-edged but warm. It's early. I know. You all right? I've decided. There was a beat of silence. You sure you want to scorch it, Dot? You know once this starts... Dot glanced out the windshield where Trent and Madeline were loading their designer duffels into the rental like royalty in exile. I don't want to scorch it, Dot said. I want to sell it. Ruth exhaled, slow and low. Okay, I'll call Elaine. Dot hung up. In the side mirror, she saw Madeline glance back at the car, just for a moment, unsure whether Dot was inside or not. She looked right through the glass and still didn't see her. Dot smiled to herself. The red rocks of Sedona stretched high and bright behind them, all rusted glory and sunlit confidence, a perfect backdrop for performance. Trent angled his body, chin raised, sunglasses perched on his head just right. He wrapped an arm around Madeline's waist as she held up her phone, angling the lens to catch both their polished smiles and the horizon behind them. 3-bedroom dream coming soon, Trent murmured, watching himself in the front-facing camera. #Ashburn Acres. Got it? Got it, Madeline said, eyes not on him, but on the likes tally. Dot stood just off frame, leaning against a wooden rail worn smooth by decades of tourists and sun. She let the desert heat soak into her scarf and bones. The wind whispered dry through the junipers, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed, wild and alone. She watched Trent tag a real estate fund she didn't recognize. The caption read, Family Roots, Generational Vision. The only roots he cared about were the kind you could bulldoze for concrete. Dot pulled her phone, the real one, from her coat pocket. The screen brightness cut against the natural light, but she didn't flinch. She tapped through her contacts and pressed the name she'd saved weeks ago, J. Morales, Sedona Land. The line picked up on the first ring. This is Morales. This is Dorothy Ashburn, she said calmly. I have a parcel on Bell Canyon Road. There was a pause, like he was scrolling. 17 acres. Undeveloped. Been off the market for 40 years, Dot finished. Until now. The parcel is available. I'm the sole signatory. He inhaled sharply. You ready to talk offers? Not yet, she said, but I'll listen. As she hung up, a second car crunched into the lot behind her. A dark green Subaru, speckled with desert dust. Ruth stepped out with her usual war-worn gait, brisk, head up, wearing black slacks and a loose denim shirt like she owned every acre they passed. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She walked straight to the back of Trent's rental and opened the trunk. Dot didn't say a word. just nodded as Ruth lifted her suitcase and set it down beside her. "What is she doing here?" Trent asked, finally noticing. "She's just checking on Mom," Madeline offered with a bright, brittle smile, as if explaining a power outage. Ruth turned to them, chin lifted. "Just passing through," she said dryly. "Thought I'd keep Dot company." Madeline exchanged a look with Trent, both too unsure to challenge her. Back inside the hotel room, Dot sat on the edge of the bed while her tablet buzzed. One message. From Elaine. "POA reversal complete. Your full control again. Quiet and sealed. Attached. Confirmation documents. New certificates." Dot opened the file. Her name gleamed alone at the bottom of each page. The others, Trent's, Madeline's, nowhere in sight. Their authority was vaporized. She didn't print them, didn't need to. She only whispered one word. "Finally." Ruth leaned against the dresser, arms folded. "That's the sound of a door closing." "No," Dot replied, folding a scarf neatly into her suitcase. "That's the sound of me locking it." She packed without a word after that, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet dignity of someone who knew exactly where everything she needed was, and exactly where it would be going next. Outside, Trent posted another story. A panning shot of the sunset and a caption, "Time to build something permanent." Dot didn't look at it. She didn't need to. At 5:42 the next morning, while the hallway was still wrapped in soft carpet silence, Dot rolled her suitcase quietly to the elevator. She stepped into the chilly pre-dawn and opened the car door herself. The engine purred to life. This time the keys were in her coat pocket. The deed, her phone, and her future, already packed beside. Her. The bell over the cafe door gave a tired jingle as Dot stepped inside, her pace deliberate, her spine stiff against the chill of the Sedona morning. The place smelled like scorched espresso and sun-baked wood, comfort layered over utility. Locals nursed coffee in chipped mugs, heads bowed over crossword puzzles and half-read newspapers. She spotted him immediately. Early 40s, pressed shirt, Patagonia vest over it. Someone who had money but didn't want to look like it. He stood when he saw her, which she noticed and appreciated. "Mrs. Ashburn?" he asked, extending a hand. "Jason Keats." Dot nodded once, slipping into the booth across from him without shaking his hand. Her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic mug the waitress set down a minute later, filled with black coffee she hadn't ordered but welcomed. Jason opened a manila folder between them. "I did a walk-by this morning. That land? Pristine. No development scars, no utility encroachment. It's rare to find anything untouched out here." Dot sipped her coffee. "That's because I made sure no one touched it." He smiled politely. "I've got a cash offer, full ask. If we sign today, I'll wire the funds before close of business." She didn't blink. "No contingencies?" "None." Dot reached into her leather handbag and removed a single paper folder, crisp, labeled, Heron. She slid it across the table like she was moving a playing card. Jason skimmed the documents, eyes narrowing with each line. "It's just you on the title?" Dot's voice was flat, certain. "Always was." Outside, the street buzzed with tourists heading toward the Red Rock trails. Wind scraped dust along the sidewalk. Dot leaned back, letting him read. She didn't rush. Silence, when used right, was leverage. Finally, he looked up. "I'll email the digital signature sheet now. You comfortable signing first?" Dot opened her flip phone and dialed. Elaine picked up instantly. "Talk to me." "He's offering full ask, all cash, no conditions." Elaine didn't hesitate. "Sign it." A quiet beat passed. Dot pressed the pen into the paper. Across town, Trent leaned against a rental jeep, phone pressed to his ear. "I'm telling you, September is perfect," he said, pacing. "We'll break ground before weather turns. I've got renderings already mocked up. Pool, fire pit, elevated deck with canyon views." Madeline sat nearby on a folding camp chair, scrolling through tile samples on her iPad. "Honey, look at this one. Turquoise with sandstone veining. It screams high desert luxury." "Perfect," Trent said, not even looking. "Investors want modern Southwest chic, not grandma's adobe shack." Back in the cafe, Dot finished signing the last page and slid the folder back. Jason stood and shook her hand this time. "I'll have the wired receipt to you in 3 hours. You just changed my quarter." Dot didn't smile, but she nodded. She left the cafe just as the heat was starting to rise off the pavement, the scent of sage and gasoline heavy in the air. She climbed back into the car, her car, and pulled the door shut with a satisfying thud. This time the keys were already in her purse. The deed was sealed. The silence was hers. She turned the ignition, not to drive away, not yet, but just to hear the purr. Control had a sound. It sounded like this. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A message from Elaine. "Contract sent to county registrar. Clock's ticking." Dot closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sun warm her face through the windshield. Somewhere out there, Trent was still pitching a future he never owned. The morning sun was barely lifting when Dot pulled out of the cafe parking lot, the steering wheel warm beneath her fingertips, the silence inside the car intact and powerful. She didn't need music. The hum of the tires on asphalt, the faint whistle of wind around the side mirrors. That was enough. She drove with a slow, even rhythm, as if every mile unraveled a thread she no longer needed to carry. She passed the sign for the I-17 and veered north toward Flagstaff, then east, cutting through the heart of Arizona. The red rocks gave way to pine-shadowed plateaus, saguaro to scrub, heat to cool. Each hour returned a piece of her, pulled from places Trent had tried to erase. By dusk, she found the motel. Not a chain, just a squat, weathered L-shape with green trim and a crooked sign that read, "Trail's End." The paint peeled in places, but the front porch lights still flickered on by motion. Room number 6, the same one she and Harold used to stay in when they made this trip for anniversaries, back when the world wasn't trying to silence her. She laid her coat on the same wire hanger in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress still creaked the same. She laughed softly, the sound half sorrow, half nostalgia. Outside, the night smelled of juniper and old smoke. Crickets rose in a rusted chorus. In the car, she opened the glove box and pulled out a bundle wrapped in twine, letters Harold had written during his final summer, even when he was in the same house. "Sometimes it's easier to say what matters when it's written," he'd told her. She unfolded one, yellowed at the edges. "Dot, keep your name on what's yours. They'll smile while stealing, then blame you when it's gone. Be quiet if you want, but don't be silent. H." Her phone buzzed against the console, a message from Elaine. "Transfer confirmed. County recorded it. All yours, all clear." Another buzz. "Ruth. They still don't know." Dot typed back slowly, deliberately. That's the beauty of silence. The next morning, the light was gold and low as Dot pulled out of the lot. She didn't rush the drive. She took the back roads where possible, winding through small towns that hadn't yet been turned into Airbnbs or Instagram shots. By the time she crossed into Colorado, the sun had settled behind the mountains. Her home in Denver waited like an anchor, steady, unassuming. Her own space, no posts, no pretending. Meanwhile, nearly 700 miles away, Trent parked the Jeep at the base of the Sedona parcel, eager and flushed with entitlement. Madeline was mid-call, talking backsplash samples and delivery times. He strode to the gate holding a clipboard like a developer on a site visit. But the gate was chained, and just beyond it, a wooden post leaned into the dust with a crisp white sign mounted at eye level. Sold. No phone number. No agent listed. Just a second sign beneath it. No trespassing. Private property. His voice cracked as he shouted, "What the hell is this?" Madeline's call dropped as she squinted from the passenger seat. "You said it was yours." "I thought it was," he snapped. His hands shook, clipboard trembling. Behind him, a neighbor walking her dog paused and said, "Oh, you're the family she cut out?" Trent turned, eyes wide. "What did you say?" But the woman had already turned the corner. The screen shook slightly as Trent filmed the view through his windshield, his voice edged in disbelief. "Somebody sold the land under us. If anyone has information, DM me. This is theft." Dot watched the video from her porch swing, her tea warm between her palms. The clip ended with Trent's face twisted in anger, lit by the bright Arizona sun. It had only been up for 10 minutes, but already dozens had shared it. She refreshed once, twice. The panic was spreading faster than the truth had. She leaned back into the swing, letting it creak under her weight as a breeze rolled through the yard. The scent of pine mulch drifted from the flower beds Ruth had helped her plant last spring. Every so often, the wind teased her hairline, cooling the spot where her pulse ticked in quiet satisfaction. Her phone pinged, then again, and again. Carla. Dot? What's going on with the Sedona property? That your name I saw on the deed listing? David from down the block. Trent's melting down online. You okay? Dot didn't answer. She just took another sip. The next call came with no preview. Just Madeline, vibrating through her screen like a wasp at the window. She let it ring. And ring. Then, finally, curiosity won out. Dot answered with the calmness of someone who'd already counted every move before the game began. Madeline's voice came hot and fast. You sold it? You sold the land? What were you thinking? Trent had plans. We brought you there. Dot stared out at the low fence Ruth had painted Robin's egg blue. A hummingbird flitted past. I remember, she said, her voice as soft as steam. You brought me there, then left me in the car. A pause, static. Madeline breathed through her nose. Don't do this, Dot. This doesn't look good for you. Dot smiled. You're right. She hung up, blocked the number. A second later, another call came through from Trent. She didn't bother answering that one at all. Instead, she stood, walked to her front door, and turned the small brass deadbolt. There was no need, but it felt right. By dusk, the air had cooled and the internet had burned itself into a frenzy. A local real estate group had reposted Trent's story with a skeptical caption, "If the land was yours, why wasn't your name on the title?" In the silence of her living room, Dot unfolded a handwritten letter Ruth had handed her just that morning. Neatly typed, official letterhead stamped at the top. Elaine Ward, attorney at law. She smiled and slid it into the manila envelope resting on the entryway table. Outside, headlights swept across the street, then idled. A familiar shape. Dot watched from behind the curtain. Ruth stepped out of her car, heels slow and deliberate on the concrete. She held the envelope like it weighed nothing. I assume they're still yelling? Dot asked as she opened the door. Mostly emojis now. Fire, explosion, skull. Ruth handed over the envelope. This one's for Trent. Dot took it, running a finger across the clean, formal seal. Declares him legally non-entitled, states you were of sound mind, confirms he was never on the deed, and, Ruth pulled out a copy, makes sure he can't pursue future POA without a judge. Dot chuckled. He'll frame it. Out of spite. No, Ruth said. He'll burn it. But he'll know what it said. Dot nodded, slid the envelope into the outgoing mailbox, and raised the red flag. The courtroom smelled faintly of old pine cleaner and fluorescent dust, as if someone had tried to scrub away the tension but failed to touch the corners. Trent stood at the plaintiff's table, jaw tight, suit jacket rumpled from haste. Madeline sat beside him, hands folded too neatly to be sincere, her gaze flicking from the judge to the door like she expected someone to burst in and save them from themselves. Dot entered quietly with Elaine, her cane whispering against the polished floor. She didn't need it, not today, but it helped punctuate each step. Confidence didn't have to be loud, it just had to be steady. Judge Myers, stern but not unkind, looked over the docket. Case 484-C, Ashburn vs. Ashburn, petition for injunction against property transfer due to alleged elder fraud. Elaine rose. Your Honor, the transfer was executed legally, with clear documentation, verified by the county recorder's office. No fraud, no coercion. Trent sprang up, voice rising before the judge even nodded. She's not well. She doesn't know what she's doing. That land was meant for the family. Elaine raised one brow and handed over a folder. Exhibit A. Medical evaluations from 2 certified professionals, dated within the last 6 months, both stating full cognitive capacity. Exhibit B. Emails, texts, and call logs in which my client responded to financial discussions in complete clarity. The judge flipped through the packet. Elaine continued. And Exhibit C, a sworn affidavit from Miles Everett, night clerk at the Sunset Motor Inn in Flagstaff. Dot watched as Trent paled. He states that Mr. Ashburn and Mrs. Ashburn's granddaughter-in-law left her locked in a running car overnight, that she was alert, coherent, and in possession of legal documents. I believe his exact words were, "She knew more about that land than they ever will." The judge didn't smile, but his eyes tightened in something close to it. Madeline hissed, "This is character assassination." "No," Elaine snapped back, "this is legal fact." The judge looked over his glasses. "Ms. Ashburn, do you understand the implications of the sale?" Dot stood slowly, adjusting the sleeve of her jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. The land was mine. Always has been. I sold it. Knowingly, willingly, and with benefit to no one but myself and the causes I believe in." Trent muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." The judge nodded. "And it's been confirmed by the county recorder?" Elaine nodded once. "Filed, stamped, and recorded." He leaned back, eyes landing hard on Trent. "Emergency injunction denied, petition dismissed." The gavel struck once, crisp and final. Trent slammed his hand against the table, the sound echoing across the courtroom. "She betrayed us." Dot turned to him, her voice like frost laid over fire. "I remember what betrayal looks like. It's 2 people walking into a hotel while their elder waits in the cold." Trent took a step forward, but Madeline grabbed his sleeve. "You'll make it worse," she hissed. Elaine pulled one more form from her briefcase, sliding it across the bench to the clerk. "This," she said, "is a motion to bar Trent and Madeline Ashburn from submitting future POA claims or estate-related requests regarding Dorothy Ashburn without judicial pre-approval. Permanently." The clerk stamped it without hesitation. Dot didn't look back as they walked out of the courtroom. She didn't have to. She had just locked a door they'd never open again. The bank envelope made a soft click when Dot laid it flat on her kitchen table. Inside, a cashier's check for $150,000. No digital trail, no alerts pinging Trent's phone. Just paper, ink, and the final breath of an illusion they had built around her as weak and unaware. By the morning, she didn't rush. She picked up her reading glasses, clicked her pen once, then twice, and wrote in small, purposeful script on the memo line, "In memory of Harold Ashburn, for those who carry more than their share." The Rural Caregiver Scholarship had been Elaine's idea originally, but Dot expanded it, designed it not just to help with tuition, but housing, gas, respite support. Caregivers like Ruth had gone unnoticed too long, women who shouldered the heavy hours while the loud ones claimed credit. By the afternoon, the donation was filed and funded through the Ashburn Quiet Aid Trust, a name she'd invented to honor her husband's favorite phrase, "Sometimes the loudest change walks in on soft shoes." She smiled as she printed a copy of the check, slipped it into a brushed silver frame, and rang Ruth. "Mail's coming your way," she said. "I already know it's lethal," Ruth replied. "You sound like someone who just cut an artery." Just the artery they were drinking from. Later that evening, Carla came by with a casserole and eyes full of nosy sparkle. "You see Trent's post?" Dot raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" Carla pulled out her phone and read aloud. "Whole project's been sabotaged. Someone moved against us behind closed doors. We'll recover. But people should know where betrayal starts. In your own damn blood." Dot stirred her tea calmly. "Poetic. Untrue, but poetic." Carla leaned closer, lowering her voice. "His American Express got declined at the garden center. Madeline was holding $400 worth of pavers. They left it all in the cart." Dot didn't gloat. She never did. But her lips twitched. Carla grinned, satisfied. "You're the quietest wrecking ball I've ever seen." Dot turned back toward the window. Hummingbirds flitted around the feeder Ruth had hung near the porch light. "He assumed I was building an empire for him." she said softly. I was building an exit. The next morning, Dot checked her email and found the ping waiting. Subject line: Public defamation violation. Madeline Ashburn. Facebook post. Elaine's message was short. Saw this, forwarding to my litigation contact. She tagged your name directly. Bad idea. Attached was a screenshot. Madeline, in full meltdown mode, had posted, when your husband's grandmother sells land, she doesn't even understand and ruins your family's future. Is that even legal? Asking for a lawyer. Or 5. Comments ranged from sympathy to suspicion. Wasn't the land in her name, though? Careful. Sounds like someone's pissed they lost free money. One said simply, imagine leaving your elder in a running car overnight and expecting a payout. Dot exhaled, not with smugness, just with finality. Every dollar they had mentally spent was now buried under paperwork they couldn't touch. She hadn't just removed them, she'd rewritten the script, stage directions and all. Ruth called just before sunset. The check photo's on my mantle. I lit a candle next to it. Dot chuckled. Funeral vibes? No, Ruth said. Celebration of resurrection. Outside, the wind kicked up again, dusting the driveway in brittle leaves. Dot looked up at the sky, faint lavender, as if twilight was giving her a quiet standing ovation. She didn't clap back, just sipped her tea and let the silence land. The cursor blinked once, then twice on the screen. Dot hovered over the delete account button, her index finger stiff from age, but steady with intention. The screen asked, Are you sure you want to deactivate your Facebook profile? She clicked, yes. The past didn't need a timeline. Next came the phone. A new number, issued from a prepaid line. She handed the old one to Carla, who dropped it into a Ziploc bag along with 2 dried tea bags and a receipt for tile cleaner. Just in case they try to pull elder vulnerability in court, Carla said, we'll show you we're buying Lysol, not losing it. Dot chuckled softly, then held the new phone up and recorded her voicemail greeting. If I didn't give you keys, you don't get access. Goodbye. That same afternoon, she and Carla installed a black steel gate at the mouth of the long gravel drive. No buzzers, no codes, just a lock and a sign that read, Private, no turnaround, no exceptions. Dot rubbed her palm down the cool iron bar. It wasn't dramatic, it was protective and earned. Later that week, a package from Ruth arrived in a box worn with time and tape. Inside were the old family photo albums Trent had kept stashed in his garage, covered in mildew, edges curling with neglect. There was one of Dot at the Sedona land, standing with Harold in front of the wild sagebrush, both smiling but sunburned. A yellow sticky note was affixed to the sleeve. They forgot these matter, but I didn't. Dot stepped out onto her back patio with the albums in her arms and a matchbox in her coat pocket. One by one, she tore the photos out and fed them to a small steel fire pit Ruth had gifted her the Christmas after Harold passed. The smoke curled upward, carrying every false memory with it. When it was over, she sat beside the last smoldering corner, wrapped in silence, no longer held hostage by paper nostalgia. The next day, Ruth forwarded her a screenshot of a message request from Madeline. It read, I just think we should all talk. Family's important. We can be civil, right? Ruth had replied with a single word. No. Dot laughed so hard, she had to sit down. By the following month, the land in Sedona began transforming. Not into tile-decked casitas or overpriced Airbnbs, but into open, protected ground. The conservation group Elaine had contacted finalized the transfer. Wild juniper would remain wild. Soil would stay unflattened. The foundation Trent once saw as future profit was now permanent quiet. Dot received a cream-colored envelope in the mail, embossed with a copper-inked seal. You are cordially invited to the Sedona Land ribbon-cutting ceremony underneath, in small print, in honor of Dorothy Ashburn, who protected what mattered. She held the invitation in our hands for a long while, her thumbs brushing the textured paper like it might hum. She didn't cry, not quite, but her eyes misted enough that the words shimmered. The sun broke over the Sedona Ridge in slow gold, slipping across red rock like a blessing. Folding chairs had been set up in neat rows near the trailhead, facing a small platform made of reclaimed wood. Wild sage framed the makeshift stage. The smell was sharp and grounding. Dot stood behind the podium in her soft gray slacks and a dusty blue sweater, her late husband's color. She didn't fidget. She didn't need notes. The microphone wavered slightly with the breeze. "Land," she said, her voice low but clear, "remembers how it's treated." A hush fell across the 20 or so attendees, local officials, conservation reps, and 2 families who had lived in the canyon for generations. "My family believed this land was currency, but it was inheritance in the real sense, something sacred, not saleable." She paused. No one stirred. "I let others speak for me for too long. Now the land speaks for itself." And with that, she stepped back. No applause at first. Just a silence that felt heavier than noise, then a quiet ripple of clapping, respectful and steady. The kind people save for something earned. The local paper posted the ceremony photos that afternoon. The headline read, "Sedona Land, Saved by Silent Owner." The article never mentioned Trent. Not once. But the camera captured Dot perfectly, standing beside the newly mounted plaque at the base of the trail. It read, "In honor of dignity, earned, not inherited." When Trent saw it, hours later on his phone screen, he stared long enough for the display to go black. He refreshed. Still no mention, just Dot, and land he couldn't touch anymore. Elaine sent a formal cease and desist the following morning. Any reference to business interest, familial authority, or implied estate involvement will be legally challenged. You are not associated with the conservation parcel in any capacity. Madeline commented under one of the press photos, bitter and sharp, "That land should have stayed in the family." Her post was quietly removed by the Conservation Board's moderator. Dot never replied. Back in Denver, Dot signed one last check in her name. A quiet donation to the First Redeemer Church, where she'd once cleaned pews after services and lit candles in the alcove for people she missed. She asked for no recognition, just 2 new benches in the courtyard and coat hooks near the entrance, for those who come in carrying too much. Carla helped her mail it. "You're too humble to name anything after yourself," she said. Dot gave a small smile. "It's more satisfying when the people I did it in spite of have to hear my name from someone else." That evening, her email pinged. The subject line was clean and professional. "Request for interview, Elder Justice Series." The message read, "We'd like to feature your story in an upcoming piece on quiet legal resistance and elder autonomy. Your conservation work and the way you reclaimed it has inspired a lot of attention. Would you be open to a conversation?" Dot closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and exhaled. Not because she was tired, but because the truth had started to echo louder than the lies ever did. They built a brand on inheritance. She wrote the truth in ink. The essay went live on a Wednesday morning. No fanfare, no bold-face revenge, just quiet truth laid out in a slow, burning cascade of sentences that read like memory set to fire. Dot had titled it simply, "The Back Seat and the Deed." The editor published it under the Voices section of a national elder rights platform. No embellishment, no preamble, just her words, verbatim. "I was left in a car overnight with the engine running," it began. "They said it was safer than bringing me inside. They also said the land was already theirs. They were wrong, about everything." The next line struck like a match. "I had the deed in my purse. Within 4 hours, the share count broke 5,000. Comments poured in, a masterpiece in measured rage. I sent this to my sister. We needed to read it together. Thank you for reminding me my silence is not the same as weakness." By nightfall, it hit trending on 3 caregiving forums. A disability rights group quoted her 3rd paragraph in a graphic. Several legal aid organizations began distributing the piece in elder literacy kits. Dot didn't check the numbers, but Elaine did, and she couldn't stop smiling. "I think you just rewrote the narrative," Elaine texted. Meanwhile, the backlash landed exactly where it should. Madeline's Etsy storefront, Heritage West Designs, was review-bombed with furious 1 stars. One comment read, "Maybe focus on respect instead of resin coasters?" Another, "I don't support people who leave grandmothers in running cars." Trent fared worse. The real estate development conference he had bragged about for months rescinded his invitation. Someone linked Dot's story under one of his promotional tweets with the comment, "You sure you built this with your own hands, champ?" That tweet racked up thousands of likes before Trent locked his account. Dot didn't respond to any of it. She didn't need to. Her essay didn't name names, but it drew the silhouette perfectly. And the people who knew. That Friday, a soft white envelope slid through her brass mailbox. No return address. Handwritten. She opened it over her kitchen sink, the kettle just beginning to whisper on the stove. Inside, a single sheet of notepaper, lined. Slightly uneven tear at the top, like it had been yanked from a journal. The penmanship was tight, almost defensive. "I read your piece. I didn't understand until now. You were never the problem. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." No signature, no clue, but she knew. She folded it carefully, tucked it inside the back of her recipe journal, between the pages for lemon bars and beef stew, right where Ruth would know to find it someday. That afternoon, Ruth arrived with a thin black frame and a wide grin. "It deserved better than a printout," she said, holding up the article, now matted, glassed, and framed. Dot blinked. "You're serious? Your history now. Might as well hang it next to the thermostat." Dot laughed softly and shook her head, but took the frame anyway. It went on the wall in the hallway, above the light switch. Not bold, not flashy. Just there, like a quiet landmark. As the light faded behind the trees and the air turned cool, Dot stepped outside to check the mailbox again. Habit. Only one envelope waited. Not official. No window, just another handwritten scrawl across the front. Different ink, different paper, but something about it felt heavy. The notary's stamp pressed down with a final click, crisp and final like a gavel hitting a block. Carla leaned back, glanced at Dot over the rim of her glasses, and said simply, "It's airtight." Dot nodded, her fingers still curled lightly around the pen. The final clause read as clearly as she had wanted. All claimants not explicitly named herein are to be barred from contestation, access, or posthumous contact. No appeals, no reinterpretations, no room for sentiment. Elaine reviewed the document one last time, glasses low on her nose, lips pursed in quiet satisfaction. "I've filed this across 4 counties and a state registry. If they so much as Google you, they'll hit a wall." Dot replied without lifting her gaze. Good. It had taken months, but every thread had been tied, knotted, and burned. The family trust was dissolved. All her holdings were pulled into a private LLC overseen by a charitable board of trustees. Ruth was officially named medical proxy. Carla served as her secondary witness. And her house? Legally reassigned, post-mortem title now scheduled to pass into the hands of a women's shelter network focused on elder support. Nothing would trickle back to Trent, Madeline, or anyone who so much as whispered their surnames in entitlement. They hadn't just closed her out of their lives, they'd tried to reframe her as disposable. Now, Dot ensured they were legally invisible. That afternoon, Carla helped Dot mount a new plaque onto the front gate. The metal was brushed bronze, nothing flashy, just the Ashburn family crest, below which read, "No solicitation, no inheritance, no access." It wasn't cruel, just definitive. That same evening, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street and idled just outside the gate. Tinted windows, California plates. The engine sat humming for a good 2 minutes before the window rolled down. Dot stood inside just behind the living room curtain, tea in hand, watching. It was Trent. Alone. His face looked thinner, cheeks sunken. The cocky lean he used to walk with had vanished. He stared at the gate like he was waiting for it to do something, like he expected it to swing open out of memory, not authorization. It didn't. When he finally reached for the call box, the button gave no response. Ruth had disconnected it 2 weeks ago. All entries required a code now, and no one outside the trust had one. Trent muttered something behind the glass. Then he reversed without honking, without texting, without even slowing near the mailbox. Dot didn't blink. Later that night, she pulled the original land deed from the fireproof file box, the one from Sedona, a document that once represented her silence, her role as a placeholder for someone else's ambition. She set it gently on her kitchen table under a soft yellow lamp, the paper glowing faintly like it was lit from within. Her hand moved without hesitation now, no tremor, no pause. With a smooth black fountain pen, she flipped the document and wrote 2 words on the back in capital letters. Remember this. It wasn't meant for a judge. It wasn't even meant for Trent. It was meant for anyone who thought aging was the same thing as disappearing. She slid the deed into a glass sleeve and placed it in the fireproof drawer again, behind the letter from the unnamed apology, behind her power of attorney filings, behind the photo of her and Ruth taken at the conservation ceremony. The shut door wasn't revenge. It was preservation. It was a locked vault around everything she had built and everything they thought they could take without asking. The road curved along the red cliffs like a ribbon slowly unwinding. Wind pressed gently against Dot's side view mirror, whispering across the frame of her old sedan. She kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles soft, eyes steady. Sedona was behind her now, at least the version they had seen. The version she had shown was something else entirely. The sun angled low in the afternoon sky, painting the rust-colored buttes in gold. Every mile she passed shimmered with memory, the picnic table where Harold had spilled coffee on her skirt, the scenic turnout where they'd once pulled over just to sit and listen to the silence. She drove slowly, not because she had to, but because there was no need to rush. Just past the overlook, she pulled off onto a gravel loop marked by a small wooden post, memorial bench, Ashburn Viewpoint. A path wound through brush and cedar, leading her to a quiet ridge where the bench waited, carved smooth and dark against the wild sandstone. A young couple already sat nearby, their fingers entwined. They were reading the inscription aloud when Dot arrived, not noticing her at first. In honor of those they tried to quiet, the woman read, brushing her hand across the backrest. Who chose the long road anyway? The man finished. Dot didn't interrupt. She let the words float out, into the canyon, where even echoes knew better than to repeat them without care. When the couple stood and wandered off, she eased herself down onto the bench, palms flat on the wood. It was still warm from the sun, humming gently beneath her fingertips. She sat there for a while, long enough to feel the breath of the canyon below, long enough to know no one could rewrite this. Later, back home in Denver, the sky was the color of steeping tea. The breeze carried the faint metallic scent of incoming rain, mingling with the syrupy sweetness of blooming gardenia by the back fence. Dot stepped out onto her porch and watched the hummingbirds flirt with the feeder, tiny wings buzzing like a soft engine, a rhythm all their own. Ruth joined her with 2 mugs in hand, the clink of ceramic against wood signaling her arrival. Good drive? Ruth asked, settling in beside her. Perfect, Dot said. No more, no less. They sipped in silence, each familiar with the comfort of shared quiet. Occasionally, Ruth would glance sideways, the corners of her mouth pulling into a smile that said everything was going exactly the way it needed to. Dot reached down beside her chair and opened the small black tote she always traveled with. She pulled out the folded deed, creased once down the middle, her signature still visible through the vellum window, and rose with quiet purpose. She walked out to the car, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. The glove box clicked open with a practiced tug. Inside were only a few things: a cloth for wiping the dash, an extra pair of glasses, and now, this. She placed the deed in the center, aligning the edges perfectly. She paused, then closed the lid. Back on the porch, the hummingbirds zipped past again, fast as secrets, uncatchable. The air had that bite to it again, the kind that sneaks up on your ankles first, then your wrists, then your bones. It reminded Dot of that night in Flagstaff, the hush of the engine humming, the windows slowly fogging, her breath curling like ghosts in the dark. But tonight she wasn't locked in the car. She wasn't waiting for the door to open. She was home. Dot sat on her front porch, wrapped in the thick blue sweater Ruth had knit her last winter, the same one she'd worn on that trip. Her tea, now lukewarm, rested in her lap as she opened her journal to the final page. The paper trembled only slightly beneath her pen. I was safer than they thought. Just not for them. You don't lose power when you're quiet. You just learn how to use it. She closed the book with a soft thud and set it beside her on the wicker table, the porch boards creaking beneath her shifting feet. Down the street, a wind chime flickered, high and metallic. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then silence reclaimed the block. The car sat where she always parked it, at the corner of the gravel drive. Clean, unassuming, like any other aging sedan. But Dot knew better. That car had become something else, a vault, a witness, a turning point. Inside the glove box, the folded deed, signed and final. The engine, still sound. She had it serviced just last week, not because she planned on any more long drives, but because it deserved to be cared for, unlike the people who once used it as her cage. Downtown, tucked inside a modest metal drawer at the Bank of Colorado, sat a fireproof envelope with her name typed in crisp font. Inside, a certified copy of the Sedona deed, a notarized version of her journal entry, and a signed letter to her lawyer instructing that her story, unembellished and unflinching, be released only after her passing. The title, They Left Me in the Car. Dot had underlined one line in that letter twice. No edits, no softening. If they wouldn't let me speak in life, they won't reshape me in death. From the porch, she could see her neighbor Carla stepping outside with her own mug, giving her a small wave. Dot returned it with a nod. Simple. Understood. She reached for the tea again. The ceramic was cool now, but she sipped it anyway. The porch light flickered on above her, casting long shadows across the lawn. It had done that every night since Harold died. Flickered once, then held. She used to think it was faulty wiring. Now she liked to imagine it was him, reminding her there was still light left in the dark. The memory of the cold night returned, of how she'd clutched her handbag like armor, of how Trent had laughed outside the hotel lobby, and how Madeline had looked right through her as if she were just part of the scenery. But none of that mattered anymore. They had left her in the dark, convinced she was harmless. They had misjudged silence. They had confused stillness with surrender. And now, they stood on the outside. Permanently. Inside that car, Dot had waited. Tonight, she no longer had to. She leaned back into the chair, spine resting comfortably against its curve, and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the day they'd left her behind. The engine had run all night, and in the morning so had she.